All right, welcome to the Monday night edition of the People Show. I'm Mark Wallace, your host and facilitator of this edition of the People Show. We got a lot to cover with you tonight, and I hope that you plan on staying with us and certainly uh, invite your friends and all those people that you know to come on board with us and to certainly be a part of the program. So, those of you who are on YouTube, those of you who are on Facebook, and those of you who are on Instagram. Now, as you shall know and note, that starting tonight, we will no longer be broadcasting on X, formerly known as Twitter. And the reason for that is that now Twitter wants for you to subscribe to Twitter. And I refuse to pay money to Twitter that is owned by Elon Musk, which is another reason why I didn't buy one of his electric vehicles. I used to really, at one time, I thought that I was going to purchase a one of his vehicles, but I decided that I would not. I would not do that, and largely because of what we found that he was all about. So I'm no longer interested in getting one of those vehicles. So I will not invest in anybody's company that I know that is certainly antithetical to our community. So, by the same reason and the same token, I will not be subscribing to X, formerly known as Twitter. Now, we have a lot to cover tonight, a whole lot to cover tonight, and I want for you to be here with me, to stick here with me. We've got some videos that we want to show you. We're going into Project 2025. We're continuing our coverage of Project 2025 so that you will get the information, so that you will find out what this effort and this agenda is all about. And there's no one period that we could give this to you, and no one segment or one show that we can give this to you. We are going to continue to provide information about this as we learn and understand it. Now, like I said, I have read the full document. It is a very, very complicated read. And I think that it is meant in many ways for that purpose. But there are those of us who have taken the time to dissect it, to really understand what it is that they are communicating and that they're advocating for. And when I say they, those of the so-called conservative movement that have this idea that they are going to change the course of our government as it was set up by the founders, and as through these past 200 plus years that efforts have been making us working to make it a more perfect union. There are those who are so cynical. There are those who are so destructive and obstructive that they want to turn the clock back. And they want to turn the clock back on certain people of certain communities, the more browning and the more blackening that this country is becoming, that this country is not, in their view, the pure white Anglo-Saxon controlled government as they would like to see it and as they have been used to seeing it. They want to change that. Well, we're not going back, we're going forward. And for those who want to go forward, those who understand that we have to work to make it better, but we have to work from a basis of people who have the same ideology, maybe not the same views, maybe different approaches, but the basic same tenements, and believe in the core fundamentals of how we move forward to make this a more perfect union, that it is working and it works for more than just a preferential few. And that's what this country is about. That's what we have to make the country about. If we are going to have a better country, then we have to be better people. And we have to root out those people who don't want it to be better for the masses. No matter what flag they fly under, no matter what political ideology that they have, we have to have people who are people of character, people of conscience, people of courage, that wants to look outside of ourselves to making sure that we are building and working towards a country that is more inclusive and accessible for people to thrive, and for people to have a great education, for people to have great opportunities as anyone else. And no, we're not going to go back to where we were, not 50 years ago, not 40 years ago, not 100 years ago, not 200 years ago, not 300 years ago. We are not going back to regressiveness. We're moving forward. Those of us who want to move forward, those of us who are not looking for ways to discriminate against other people because they don't look like we look, or they're different and they have different choices for their lives, that we do not dictate to someone's choice on how they live their lives. As long as people are not doing things that negatively impact the lives of other people, it's none of our business what they do. And don't get caught up in being inserted in what somebody else is doing. It's their business. It's not ours. Our business should be about making sure that our government is more inclusive of people and more inclusive of ideas, and creating those systems that everybody can benefit. There is more than enough. We live in the richest nation in the world. We're only 4% of the world's population, but we are the richest and the most powerful nation of all humanity. 4% of the world's population. We have more wealth than anywhere else on the planet. We have more military power than any place else on the planet. But as Scripture reminds us, to whom much is given, much is required. And so that is where we are moving forward. So those of you who agree with those, come on in. Let's get ourselves together. Let's join ourselves together and let's put ideas and put our heads together to work with people who want to make this a more perfect union. And sometimes we are not going to agree. But what we can agree is on the fundamentals, that we have a basis of a constitution, we have a basis of a declaration that we want to make this government in this country work better, no matter where you live, no matter what your ethnic makeup is, no matter where you come from. Yes, we know that there are discriminatory practices, and we need to root them out. We need to make sure that we eradicate them from our system. Systemic racism, systemic biasness, we need to eliminate those things. And it's going to take time for us to do it. But it is going to have to be with a basis of people who are willing to make those kinds of changes. Not the people who call themselves conservatives, which is wrapped in a flag of bigotry, that they don't want to change things and they don't want to make them better. That's a lot about what the so-called conservative movement is. Well, we're going to move forward from that, but we've got to identify where the problems are. And we can't be distracted with the nonsense that are coming from even from people from our community. Now, we need to help them understand. We have to educate them so that they know what the facts are, rather than the fiction that they're buying into. That we have to do. And you can only do that with people who are willing to plug into real information. The information is available to us. It is no different than your electricity. Information is power. The information empowers us. But if you don't plug into the information, you can't be empowered. No different than a lamp or a light that sits on your nightstand or a table or a desk, and it has a plug in it. It has a light bulb. But the light can never illuminate the darkness unless it is plugged in to the power that gives it the power to reflect the light. Information provides us with that to be empowered to provide light to the rest of the world. You are in darkness when you don't want to get informed, when you don't want to know what the facts are. You live in darkness and you live in delusion. I listen to programs that are very hard for me to listen to, but I have to listen to them because I believe we have the responsibility of making sure that we root out misinformation and disinformation as much as possible and provide people with information that they can be empowered with the facts. You and I can disagree on how to get to a certain place, but we have to accept the fact that wherever that place is, that it actually exists. That is a fact. It is a fact that where you live is a real place. How to get to where you live, there are many different roads, many different ways to get there. And some are shorter and some are longer, and some people who knows how to get to your place think that they have the best route. Well, you can disagree on which route to take, But the fact is, any of those routes that you take will lead you to that place, which is a real place. So you can discuss and debate on which is the best route or which is the best way. That is no different than our politics. Which is the best way for us to make health care and housing and education available to everyone? That's what we discuss. That's what we debate and come up with a solution. Not with just want to blow up the whole situation or to blow up the whole system and say that, oh, the system is no good, because you may be able to go to a different place. You may be able to go to a private school, which is fine. But that should be a choice. But everybody should have a right to getting a high quality education. Everyone. You should not be subject to a substandard education because your socioeconomics may not be what it is of someone who can afford to send their children to a private school and pay tuitions, hefty tuitions. No one should have to pay for a quality education. No one should have to pay for quality health care. Period. So those are fundamentals that every human being should have access to. And that's working to make our country and to make our country to a more perfect union. That's about working towards the future. But if you want to be with people who are just bent on being destructive, non-cooperative, and causing discord rather than having a intellectual discourse on how we can make things better for everybody. That we do not have to be a nation of winners and losers. Everybody can win. We win at different levels, but everybody can win. You don't have to have people who are squashed down to the bottom in order for somebody to make it to the top or somebody to make it really big. Everybody's not going to make it really big. Everybody's not going to be a multimillionaire. Everybody doesn't have a desire to be a multimillionaire. Everybody doesn't have a desire to be an actor. Everybody doesn't have a desire to be a professional athlete. But everybody has the right and the aspirations of being able to provide for themselves. Being okay. Everybody has a right to that. But you have a group of people who thinks differently. And they have a plan in place. And we're going to talk about that. So, Project 2025. I told you I want to talk about it. I got a whole bunch of clips for you. So it's going to be rather entertaining. It's also going to be informing. I'm going to provide you with some facts. But let me deal with something that I heard last week that I want to dispel, and making sure that you have the facts. Now, you all see my t-shirt here, right? I have my Kamala t-shirt. This program, The People Show, is all in for Kamala Harris. I was on last night with Win with Black Men to Win for Harris. Last night we were on Roland Martin and all of those who were organizing Black men to vote and support Kamala Harris and now Harris-Walz ticket. I'm all in for the Harris-Walz campaign. And I will be providing information and pushing back on the disinformation that people want to put out and the nonsense that people want to put out because they don't like the candidate. Well, something has come to our attention. Project 2025, secret training videos of Project 2025. Propublica, which is a nonprofit newsroom that investigates abuses of power and that sort of thing. Project 2025, they did this investigative story, and they have found that the controversial playbook and policy agenda for the right-wing presidential administration recently has lost their director and faced scathing criticisms from both groups, the Democratic Party for former President Donald Trump, but Project 2025's plan to train an army of political appointees who could battle against what they're calling the so-called deep state government bureaucracy on behalf of the next conservative administration. And we're working hard to make sure that that is not 2025 and Donald Trump. One centerpiece of that program is dozens of never before published videos, which were created by Project 2025's Presidential Administration Academy. The vast majority of those videos, and there were so far discovered 23 in all, totaling more than 14 hours of content, which was provided to ProPublica and documented by someone who had access to them. So apparently there was somebody who had infiltrated what the Heritage Foundation and ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Commission. Project 2025's videos coach future appointees on everything from the nuts and bolts of governing how to outwit bureaucrats. Now, what they mean by that is that they want to do away with people who work in our government, civil servant workers who have been career civil servant workers working in our government to help to forge and help to administer our governmental policies and agencies. So Project 2025, the videos coach these appointees from the nuts and bolts of governing, of how to outwit bureaucrats, in other words, to undermine our democracy. There are strategies for, messing with my notes here, I'm sorry. Let me go back. So I want to make sure that I line this all up. I'm sorry. So, Project 2025's videos coach their future appointees and governing are trying to outwit the bureaucrats. Their strategies for avoiding embarrassing freedom of information disclosure. Now, in other words, what they don't want is they want to blow up our processes. In other words, they want to put things into place. And you and I now have the right to public information. And information that is available to the public from our government, you can go and you can file a freedom of information to any of our governmental agencies about public information or processes. And you complete the freedom of information, and those governmental bodies have a responsibility that they have to provide you with the information to the question that you have raised or to the request that you have made. And they have a certain period of time to respond to your freedom of information. Project 2025 wants to work to eliminate that. So in this report, the active disclosures and ensuring that conservative policies aren't struck down by what they call left-wing judges. Some of the content is routine advice that any incoming political appointee might be told. Other segments of the training offer guidance and radically changing how the federal government works and what it does. In one of the videos, Bethany Kozma, Kozma, a conservative activist and former deputy chief of staff at the United States Agency for International Development in the Trump administration, downplays the seriousness of climate change and says the movement to combat climate change, it is part of a ploy to control people. I want to play these videos that they have discovered. Now, I'm not going to give you all 14 hours of these videos, but we're going to give you some clips from these groups and what they are telling us about these their agenda. So here's Bethany Kozma and what they're telling us about the environment. So those of you who care about the environment, and there are Black people who really do care about the environment, all of us should care about the environment, but there are people who are really working very hard in this area to help us to understand how we can take much better care of the ecos, and that we can have a much better ecological system by what we do and how we govern it. But this is what the so-called conservatives think about climate change and what they want to do with Project 2025 in these areas. Take a look.
What do you think about all of about the left's words and definitions in the environment?
It's a great point, Katie. They don't stop. Climate change, allegedly, is everywhere. And if the American people elect a conservative president, his administration will have to eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere. And according to our intelligence community, the number one threat facing our country today is, drumroll, climate change. Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change. This shows how the federal government is all in on this issue. And climate change activists wield a lot of power. This is an issue to pay attention to, as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you? I think about the people who don't want you to have children because of the impact on the environment. Perhaps not everyone will make that connection, but after spending time in the international space trying to protect life, I can tell you that this is part of their ultimate goal, to control people.
In that same video, Cosmos calls for the idea of gender fluidity. She calls it evil. Another speaker, Katie Sullivan, who you saw in that clip, who was an acting assistant attorney general at the Department of Justice under the Trump administration, takes aim at executive actions by the administration of President Joe Biden that created gender advisor positions throughout the federal government. And the goal was that Biden wrote in one order was to advance equal rights and opportunities regardless of gender and gender identity. Period. They don't want for people who they don't agree with their choice for lives to have equal protection under the law. Now, remember, conservatives are supposed to be people who are interested in small government, right? They have less intrusiveness in our lives, except for when they are in charge. These are what the so-called conservatives, and you have people here, though a very small few, and some of them call themselves supporting conservative ideas and agendas, and they know nothing about what those agendas are, and they don't even understand that those agendas are agendas that are working to reverse whatever gains that our community specifically have made. They're talking about doing away with any type of equal opportunities, or if they're talking about diversity, when they use the term diversity or equity, they're really talking about brown people, black and brown people, doing away with any type of policies that address the inequities that black people have been disproportionately disadvantaged by. These are what their efforts are. Trump has tried to distance himself from Project 2025, falsely saying that he knew nothing about it itself and had no idea who is behind it. Now, in fact, in part of the report, it found that he flew on a private jet with Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, which leads Project 2025. And in 2022, in a 2022 speech at the Heritage Foundation event, Trump said, "This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork," Project 2025, they're going to lay the groundwork and detailed plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people gives us a colossal mandate to save America, meaning to make sure that they re-elect Donald Trump so that they will be able to put in place their people to completely upturn where the country has built all the country's systems, do away with 55,000 or 50,000 civil servant employees, and put political appointees in that only have to answer to the president. Now, a review of the training videos show that 29 of the 36 speakers have worked for the Trump administration in some capacity. On his 2016 and 17 transition team in the administration, or on his 2024 re-election campaign. The videos appear to have been recorded before the resignation to 2 weeks ago of Paul Dans, the leader of the Project 2025, and they are referenced on the Project 2025's website. The Heritage Foundation said in a statement at the time of Dan's resignation that it would end Project 2025's policy-related work, but its collective efforts to build a personal apparatus for policymakers of all levels, federal, state, and local, will continue. What they're saying is that this is not just for the Trump administration, and it's not. ALEC, which is the American Legislative Exchange Commission, they go around the country, they have conferences, they have workshops, they have conventions where they actually invite people to run for local offices in their school boards, in their villages, their city councils, their mayors, their local state governments. They are working for the long haul. And in many respects, we get frustrated because we want for something to happen right now. And I understand it. I get that. But building and making our country to become a more perfect union takes a lot of work, cooperation. It's going to take time. But most of all, we have to be consistent. We have to be consistent. They're playing the long game to turn the clock back. We have to play the long game to keep the clock going forward so that we have progress, advanced real progress. That's why I like the term progressive. Progressive means to make progress. Regressive means to turn the clock back. That's what the conservative movement is. They don't want these types of progressive ideas to go forth because their great majority is shrinking more and more and more because they see the browning of America somehow is going to eat them up. This is why you saw, starting with the Barack Obama campaign, the vitriol that was coming from the right, the so-called right, the conservative movement. The vitriol of the idea that the country is not going to be run by white so-called Christian men, that they were not going to be dictating all of how we live and who gets the resources. So when that was at threat, we got to see that maybe we have not made the kinds of advances in certain areas of our social makeup that we might have convinced ourselves. And that's not a bad thing for us to realize. It might be a little sad to think that we were further down the road than we actually are. We'll get there because I think that there are more people who want to get there. And I think that that minority of people who don't want for us to get there, they're shrinking. They're getting older, they're dying off, and even many of their young people, their sons, their daughters, their granddaughters, their grandsons, don't think like they think. And they're losing grip. And they don't like it. And they really don't know what to do. Because this is the way that they have existed. And they have framed their mind to think that was the way that things were going to be, and they were going to always be, that things were never going to change. They were going to always be that way. So let's continue on. Now, Project 2025 is a 922-page document, but there are about 887 pages of their actual plan, what they call the mandate for leadership. The document lays out a vast array of policy and governance proposals, including eliminating the Department of Education, slashing Medicaid, reclassifying tens of thousands of career civil servants, we talked about that earlier, so that they could be more easily fired and replaced, giving the president greater power and control of the Department of Justice, and further restricting access to reproductive care. As we go through this document, we are finding that they basically want to control people's lives. They want to tell people how you actually how you are to live. I don't know of any other way to characterize this. When I read through this, this is a few people, a few white people, who want to tell everybody else how they have to live and then mandate it into law. Several of the speakers in the videos acknowledge that the Trump administration was slowed by staffing challenges and the inexperience of its political appointees. And they offer lessons learned from their stumbles, this meaning when Trump was in first office in 2016. Some of the advice appears at odds with the conservative dogma, including a suggestion that the next administration may need to expand the government agencies to achieve the larger goal of slashing federal regulations. In other words, that we don't have to have any type of oversight, and companies and people can do whatever they want to do in their businesses without there being any regulations. Imagine this. The planes that you fly on, the food that you eat, the clothes that you wear, the homes that you live in, the cars that you drive, the roads that you drive on. Regulations, there are processes by which we all have to participate in building cars, roads, bridges, airplanes, railroad trains, food, clothing. We have a process by which all of those things have to be. They don't want there to be any type of regulations whatsoever, that people in the quote unquote free market can do whatever it is that they want to do. And we have seen example after example what deregulation has done. Ronald Reagan was one of the biggest deregulators in history. We've seen what that does and how that puts people at risk, all in the name of profit. Rick Dearborn, who helped lead Trump's 2016 transition team and later served in the Trump White House as Deputy Chief of Staff, recalled in one of the videos how tough it was to find people to fill all of the key positions in the early days of the administration. The personnel part of Project 2025 is so important to the next president or the next conservative president, according to Dearborn, establishing all of this, providing for the expertise, looking for a database of folks that can be a part of the administration, talking to you like we are in their training videos, not about what is a transition about, Why do I want to engage? Why do I want to be engaged in it? What my role will be? That's a luxury that we didn't have, referring to a database of potential political appointees. If they were to get elected this time, if Donald Trump was to get elected this time, they are much more prepared to take these actions. Now, each president, each new elected administration has about a little more than 4,000 political appointees, jobs that they put people in, and those people are responsible to the administration in helping the president and the vice president see their vision out and their vision and their policies for the country. So each administration has its own appointees. What they are interested in doing is making sure, one, that they are going to be able to put people in who think the way that they think and will be loyal to this agenda. Not only the 4,000 that they're talking about, they want to put in another 50,000. They want to put policies in place so that they can get rid of bureaucrats that are there that are not going to be loyal to a potential Trump administration's ideas. And so they want to make it easier to get rid of those career workers, those people who've given their life to serving this country. Dan Huff, a former legal advisor in the White House Presidential Personnel Office under Trump, says in another video, the future appointees should be prepared to enact significant changes in American government and be ready to face blowback when they do. In the video, I'm going to play that video, he says, if you're not on board with helping implement a dramatic course correction he calls it, course correction, because you're afraid it'll damage your future employment prospects, it'll harm you socially. He understands that, according to the article. That is a real danger, according to Huff. It's a real thing. But please, he says, do us all a favor and sit this one out. Here's that clip.
If the next Republican president does not execute a dramatic course correction, there may never be another chance. So if you're not on board with helping implement a dramatic course correction because you're afraid it'll damage your future employment prospects, it'll harm you socially, look, I get it. That's a real danger. It's a real thing. But please, do us all a favor and sit this one out.
You can't make this stuff up. You cannot make this stuff up. There are 14 hours of these types of videos that has been made available and in this story. And I'm just giving you some of the highlights of them. And maybe in another program, we'll play some of the longer clips. We'll give you some more of what it is that they are actually planning. Let's see. I want to see that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go back a little bit further than I wanted to. Okay, here is Burton, who is talking about not having enough people to put into place some of their transit. I want to make sure that I do get all of these videos in because I want you to see what is going on. Because again, We don't have to agree on every policy. What we do need to agree on is a foundation from which we all agree to continue to keep stabilization in place so that we could work to make things better. Maybe you have an idea, maybe somebody else has an idea, maybe I have an idea, and we don't agree on those ideas. But if we can sit at a table and we can have a reasonable conversation and say, yeah, we might not agree on certain things, but we've got to keep our foundation in place. So we're going to support making sure that we at least have the opportunity to keep the foundation in place. And then we can sit around and we can debate, we can discuss and issues and how we get to a certain place to fix problems. By the way, hopefully next week, I've reached out to them. There are Republicans who are organizing other Republicans to support Kamala Harris, not because they agree with Kamala Harris' political ideology, but because they agree with that we must we must save our democracy from the people who are so-called themselves Republicans or conservatives, from what they are trying to do, namely Donald Trump. People like Adam Kinzinger, who is a former congressman from Illinois. I'm going to try to see if I can't get him on the program next week. Listen, there are people who are Republicans that I would love to sit down and talk with. People who believe that, yes, our democracy is far more important than my political persuasion, and that I will not compromise the democracy because somebody who happens to be running for an office calls themselves a Democrat or calls themselves a Republican. Our democracy is more important. We have to save that so that you and I can sit around and disagree, so that you and I can sit around and have a conversation to agree, not to name call, but to agree to try to figure out ways to find solutions to problems. Solutions to healthcare problems, solutions to education problems, solutions to employment problems, solutions to equity problems. Those are the kinds of solutions. We're not going to find solutions to those problems by throwing rocks at each other, so that we can try to make the other side look as bad. And then when you have people who are talking like these people are talking, this is their talk. All right, so let me see. Let's go to David Burton. David Burton on economic policy. He's supposedly an economic policy expert at the Heritage Foundation, discusses the importance of an obscure yet influential agency called the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. The Trump administration used the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs to help roll back regulations on economic, physical, and environmental issues. Under Biden, the Office of Administration and Regulations Affairs took a more aggressive stance in helping to review and shape new regulations, which include efforts to combat housing discrimination, a ban of sale of so-called ghost guns, and set new renewable fuel targets. Burton, in the Project 2025 video, urges future political appointees to work in that office and argues that the office should increase its staffing levels considerably in service of conservative goals. Now, conservative goals, they're not interested in anybody else other than those people who agree with conservative goals. Now, mind you, conservatives in the United States, conservatives are in the minority. There are only about 35 or 40% of registered voters that identify with being conservative. So it's this 35 or 40% that want to dictate to the rest of us that these are the ideas and only these ideals matter. That's what Project 2025 is. It's a dictate. It is not a discourse where we can discuss policies. That's not what it is. But here's Burton. Here's clip. All of what you're seeing are clips that have been discovered and turned over to Propublica by this insider that turned these 23 videos over of 14 hours, giving and laying out what Project 2025 is and what the conservative agenda for taking control of our government is. Take a look.
OIRA is a very small agency, too small actually. It has a staff of about 50. A conservative administration should increase its staffing levels considerably. 50 people are not enough to adequately police the regulatory actions of the entire federal government. OIRA is one of the few government agencies that limits the regulatory ambitions of other agencies.
So they want to do away with that. They want to do away with regulations. They want to do away with any oversight to making sure that companies, now, they don't say companies, but they talk about agencies. These are the agencies that look and that we have oversight of how people are functioning in our government and in the private sector. That yes, you have the right to do business. You have the right to sell your goods and your services. But there are guidelines by which you can sell your services. Like companies don't have the right to become conglomerates. We have something called antitrust laws that prevent companies from becoming conglomerates. And we had in the conservative administrations, in particular in the Ronald Reagan years, he stopped enforcing the antitrust laws so that we don't have monopolies, which is why most of the goods that we get, that we see made in places like China and Japan, very few of our goods have made in the USA on them anymore. Well, that all happened as a result of Ronald Reagan not enforcing the antitrust laws. He decided no longer to enforce the antitrust laws. Now, they started under Clinton. They were expanded to enforcing them under the Obama administration, and the Biden administration has really expanded them, which is why we are starting to see more manufacturers come back. And of course, the policies that he passed with the Inflation Reduction Act, the Chips and Science Act, and the infrastructure bill, which they have subsidies for manufacturers to set back up in the United States, in our communities, provide jobs for people in our communities to build and provide those goods and services. We have no problems with people making money, right? We have no problem with people making money, with companies making money. But as you are earning those billions of dollars, and when you are earning those millions of dollars, your companies, you have to make sure that you are taking the people who are helping you earn those types of earnings along with you, that you are reinvesting in people and investing in those people who are helping to take those companies to those heights. That they want to do away with. They don't want any type of oversight. No oversight whatsoever. And who does this hurt the most? Who do you think it's going to hurt the most? Who do you think that the people that are going to be the people who are going to pay the biggest cost, the biggest price? Again, when you look at some of the policies that have come through this administration, and of course, Kamala Harris saying that she is going to continue that trend to making sure that workers are being taken care of, that people are being properly treated and fairly paid, increasing the minimum wage, and making sure that people pay their fair share. Wealthy people pay their fair share. Nobody is against anybody becoming wealthy. Nobody. Not Democrats, not independents. Nobody's against somebody becoming wealthy. What we are against and should be against is greed, to the point that you are not being equitable with the people who have helped you get to where you are. People have to help you produce your goods and have to help you distribute your goods. And people should benefit as you are benefiting. That's why I really, when I had the opportunity to meet Ben Cohen a few years ago, when I was on the air, and when we were on 87th Street, he was coming in to work with some of the progressives, and he came by. He was my guest. In fact, I drove him over to the event. It was really cool. Ben Cohen, who was one of the co-founders of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream, was on my program, and he talked about, one, they never set out to be this big ice cream conglomerate. They never set out to do that, but it became a very successful ice cream company. But what he and Jerry did, his co-founder, they made sure that as they grew, as they did well, that everybody else in the company did well. So the CEO, the top executives of Ben & Jerry's, never made more than 7 times that of the average worker. And every time that the upper management and CEOs would get bonuses and salaries increases, that they could never make more than 7 times than the average worker. So whenever they increased their earnings, they had to increase everybody else's earnings with them. So as they grew, everybody else in the company grew. Guess what? Ben & Jerry's has now been around for, I think, 35 years or so. I'll have to look it up. It's still a very successful company, even though that Ben & Jerry's both are on as advisors. They're not on the actual board, but those systems are still in place. And it's still a very successful company, and they're doing very, very well. And the people in the company are very happy there. People have retired from that company, have started there and worked for 30 years, 25 years, and retired with great benefits. That is the way that it's supposed to be. Me and my little small company, hire anyone that I cannot pay a decent wage. So everybody who works with me earns a very good wage. I don't believe that I should be benefiting. And the people who have helped me to redevelop the houses, to do the work, I don't swing a hammer. I don't use a screwdriver. I don't lay tile. I don't swing a sledgehammer. I'm not getting dirty. I'm not doing that. I'm basically, directing. And I could not do that without having people to work with me. So I made a conscious decision, no matter how small or how big my company would get, that I would do the exact same thing to make sure that as I grew, people who are working with me grows as well, and they're doing well as well. This ideology and this, where I had a conversation. I was at the Bud Billiken parade this past Saturday, had on my Kamala 2024 shirt. If you want a Kamala 2024 shirt, just let me know. All you have to do is text me at 773-617-2042. And you can Zelle me. The shirts are $20. And I am donating for every shirt that we sell, $5 of every shirt that we sell. If you're with the campaign, is going to be donated to the Kamala Harris Walls campaign. So I had my shirt on, and I really didn't have any intention on selling the shirts, none. I was just wearing my shirt to show that I am a Kamala Harris supporter. And so I'm out at the breakfast. They have this pre-breakfast at the Bud Billiken parade, or before the Bud Billiken parade, out in the park. And of course, all the politicians comes and different people who, my AT Senstack, who is the granddaughter, I believe she's the granddaughter of Mr. Senstack, who is still running the Defender Charities and runs the parade. So we were out there and we were having a conversation, and somebody asked me what was my thought about the city operating its own city-owned grocery stores. And I said, I think it's a phenomenal idea. I think that privatization is a big problem for us in this country. Anytime that we have privatized things like school janitors, worst thing we could have done for keeping our schools clean. We privatized them and given a contract to, who knows. Here in Chicago, it's Magic Johnson or whatever his company has, a big cleaning contract. Horrific. Schools have never been in worse physical condition since we went to privatization. Conservatives and people on the right seem to think that we can do things more efficiently if we privatize them. Well, the facts just don't bear that out. The facts don't bear that out. So, and that'll be a discussion for another day. But anyway, when I was coming up, and I came up through public schools, the janitors took pride in their schools. They were clean. You never, was unheard of that the floors weren't sparkling, The bathrooms weren't clean. The grounds were well kept because the janitorial staffing took pride in taking care of their buildings. It was their buildings. And we respected the janitors. We respected those people who kept our schools. You've never heard of what we hear of today. So privatization just doesn't work. Certainly about our public commons. I'm not talking about, you going out to the free market and setting up your private company. I'm talking about our public commons. So the question was asked about, what do I think of the city having its own grocery stores? I think it would be a phenomenal idea. Take the profit out of it. Take the profit out of it and make the food much more affordable for everybody, especially those people who get hit the hardest. Poor people and working people. Take the profit out of it. First of all, there should be no profit in food in the first place, in my opinion. Our grocery stores, I think it would be a phenomenal idea that they were city-owned and city-operated in the local municipalities. Take the profit out of food. Everybody needs food. Everybody needs water. Take the profit out of it. I thought it would be a great idea. Then they said, well, so we would then be like a socialist state. I said, I don't agree with that, but let's talk about socialism. You want your police? You want your fire? You want your paramedics? Right? We all chip in and pay for those. There's no private fire department. There's no private police department. We pay taxes, and we all benefit from the utilization and the services of our police department and our fire department. That is a social program. That is socialism, if you will. So socialism is not some dirty word that people have made dirty. All socialism means is that it is shared by all. That's what that means. That we all pay for it and we all share. That's what it means. It's not a dirty word. We actually have our public schools, our public colleges. What's wrong with that? Nothing. That we all get to share in that. You want to go to a private institution? Fine. You can afford to go to a private institution? Fine. Go to a private institution. Nothing wrong with you going to a private institution if that's what you want to do. Nothing. But don't say that because you can afford it, that somehow because you could afford to go to a private institution, that the next person does not deserve to get a high quality education. Or that you're able to go out and go to a fancy restaurant and afford to buy certain foods that the ordinary average person does not deserve to have high quality foods, high quality nutrition. Take the profit out of food. I would support that 1,000%. I think that we would be the better for it. This idea of, weaponizing inflation to prove a political point or to get to a political position, take the profit out of food. Have the government to operate the stores and sell the food at a reasonable price where it could pay for itself. The same way that Social Security does. Social Security is solvent because we pay for it. It is not a part of the federal deficit and is not allowed to be a part of the federal deficit because you pay for it through your earnings. And it is your money when you reach a certain retirement age. Having publicly operated, owned grocery stores would be the same way. They would not be free, but what it will be is it will be affordable, and that everybody will share in that affordability, and everybody will have access to high quality foods, period. Somehow, it is my prayer and it is my hope that we will get to the point that we do not have to have losers in order for us to prosper. Nobody has to lose in order for me to prosper. Nobody. Not even the people who work with me have to lose. Everybody who works with me. It is my responsibility to make sure that if I'm earning, those people are helping me to earn. And those people have a right to participate. They have a right to be paid well because they put forth the opportunity for me. So I think that that is a fundamental, that is just a fundamental, that anybody who is working for me, anybody who works in my employ, whether they're a contractor, whether they're employed, anybody who is doing, that person is going to earn a fair and be paid a fair wage, not just some, just to get by. Because I believe that if I can't afford to pay somebody a decent wage, I shouldn't be doing that business. And that's just the way that I operate. I don't have some big, huge conglomerate company. My company does fairly well. My business does fairly well. And because my business is doing well, it is because there are people who are helping me for it to do well, and those people should be paid accordingly. I think that that should be the way of any corporation, any business owner. The idea that somebody would be upset with minimum wage going up. I had this argument with people before. You can't pay a person a minimum wage, you shouldn't even be in business. You can't pay a person a livable wage, you shouldn't be in business. You should just close up. Or just do it yourself. If you want to hoard all the money, then you do all of the work to get all the money. If you don't want to pay people a livable wage. And that's not some sanctimonious position. It is a reasonable position. It's a decent position. And guess what? Every company that I know that takes care of their employees, those companies are doing well. Costco's, for one. The CEO of Costco's, the CEO and the family of Costco, they said, look, our family can do very well and live very comfortably, very well off of $300 million a year. We don't need to be hoarding billions and billions and billions of dollars. So what do? They make sure that they take care of their employees. They've got some policies that I'm a little annoyed with, but that's got nothing to do with their employees. They take care of the policies. There's another company, I've never been in their stores, it won't go in their stores. The name ends with Mart, and there's only 8 members in the family. And it's one of the largest corporations in the country. I think second to the post office or something like that. Don't even want to take care of their employees. Don't even want to make sure that employees have access to health care. I've never been in one of those stores and never will go in one of those stores. Period. But I digress. So let me get back to Project 2025. A Trump government in waiting. I'm going through this. The speakers in the Project 2025 videos are careful not to explicitly side with Trump or talk about what a future Trump administration might do. They instead refer to a future conservative president or conservative administration. But the links between the speakers in these videos and Trump are many. Now, last week, I read off to you Agenda 47, and I'm lining up for you Agenda 47 with Project 2025, and they are inextricably tied together. So no matter how much he tries to distance himself from Project 2025, he can't do it. It is interwoven into his agenda. In fact, in my opinion, as I read his agenda on his website, Project 2025 was the foreword to his agenda. The National Security Council, NASA, the Office of Management and Budget, USAID, and the Department of Justice, Interior, State Homeland Security, Transportation and Health and Human Services. Another speaker has worked in the Senate office of the now vice presidential pick of Trump's, J.D. Vance. They've worked for him. Sullivan, the former Department of Justice acting Assistant Attorney General in charge of the department's Office of Justice Programs, which oversees billions in grant funding, appears in 3 different videos. Levitt, who is in a training video titled The Art of Professionalism, worked in the White House press office during Trump's first presidency and is now the national press secretary for his re-election campaign. A consistent theme in the advice and testimonies offered by these Trump alumni is Project 2025 trainees should expect a hostile reception if they go to work in the federal government. This is the, let's see if I can pull that video up that talks about, see if I have that one. I don't know if I have that video, but I'm going to see if I can pull that video. Oh, this is what they talk about in their survival tip.
Now, in terms of a tip, survival tip, do not let career bureaucrats hinder you from advancing the president's agenda. Keep in mind, you're coming into a place, Washington, D.C., that does not share your conservative values. They're even hostile to it because you're here to do something that's not in their interest. They're not going to be your friend, and they're not going to help you succeed. What are you doing? You're here to cut government. You're here to cut spending. You're here to cut regulations. You're here to stop the waste, fraud, and abuse that's going on. A lot of careers have been made from that. A lot of money has been made from that. Fiefdoms have been built around it. So you're going to get a lot of opposition here. It's an entire industry of opposition from lobbyists, professional associations, contractor groups, and disappointingly, faith-based organizations.
Now look, they're trying to somehow show that they are people of purity or something. These are some sanitized people. What these people are doing, first of all, they're hypocrites, suggesting that there is waste, fraud, and abuse. And of course, there is waste, fraud, and abuse. And we have to deal with waste, fraud, and abuse. You don't deal with waste, fraud, and abuse by blowing up your fundamentals, by suggesting that only their ideals, which they like to couch in conservative, because the word kind of sounds good, right? It's it has a ring to it that sounds good, but it's wrapped in inequities. Absolutely wrapped in inequities. In fact, it does not represent what the traditional conservatives represent. When I was growing up, they didn't call themselves conservatives. They called themselves Republicans, as I remember. This term conservative has really just been sort of enhanced over the probably last 10 years or so, 20 years. But there was a guy by the name of Jack Kemp who was in Congress. And when I was in high school, and Jack Kemp was a Republican that I certainly admired. I admired him because he didn't talk about Republican versus Democrat. What he talked about is solving problems. That's who Jack Kemp was. How do we solve problems? How do we make life better for everyone? That's what it is. Now, you may have some ideas as a Republican. I may have some ideas as a Democrat. But how do we bring ourselves together to make our union a more perfect union? If we use that idea and that frame of working together, that we don't have to be mean, and we don't have to be nasty, and we don't have to call names and call people stupid because we read and people understand and they can differentiate facts from fiction. And we know of policies that actually work to make it better for more people. Look at what's happening. And look, understand this. Policies that are put into place are about the future. So there's a rare time in government where things happen right away. They are about the future. Like we will see, and we're starting to see, where people only have to pay $35 a month for insulin. Those who are on Medicare, their prescriptions are capped at $2,000 a year. Student loan, those kind of things. The Affordable Care Act, which got slammed, and people were trying to discredit, and they were trying to discredit because they probably knew that the Affordable Care Act would become more popular, and it is becoming more popular as it is rolled out. It is becoming more popular. And guess what? Everybody's benefiting from that. The country is benefiting from that as a result of people having access to health care. The country is better off from that. We're not worse off from that. You don't see insurance companies lining up, or insurance execs lining up to want to do away with the Affordable Care Act, because they are still doing well, because they have, 80 million more customers. Now, we still have 80 million people who are underinsured or without insurance, and we have to get better at that. But the point is that it takes time for these things to really benefit. Like the GI Bill. Republicans like to call things spending, or I'm going to say some of the extremists like to call it spending, when it's not benefiting a certain group of people. Democrats look at it as investments, as we are investing in people. Let's take the GI Bill. The GI Bill that afforded for military veterans to come home, provided resources for them to get trained for job readiness, get a skill, go to college, go to law school, go to med school, become dentists. And as those people became proficient in a trade or a skill or a profession, guess what? They earn money, and they are in a position to earn money. And there was a study that was done about the GI Bill, which they canceled, the Republicans. So there was a 20-year study done on the GI Bill. And that study, an analyst was done on the GI Bill, and showed that for every dollar that we invested into people who were in the military, so that people would be able to get trained for a skill or a profession, go to college, go to law school, go to med school. For every dollar that we spent on the GI Bill, we got $7 in return. That's called a return on your investment. That is what government is about. Putting people in a better position so that people can have better lives. And if people have better lives, they will be able to give the government a return on its investment. Take the Golden Triangle down in Mississippi. They invested and brought in companies, and they invested in people. And as a result of investing in people and training people to operate those industries and giving them the tax dividends or the tax trade-offs to do that, everybody wins for it. Everybody wins. Hundreds of millions of dollars that are going into our treasuries. People are working, earning good livings, $60,000 to $112,000 a year. And those people will be paying federal taxes and local taxes, buying goods, buying services, helping strengthening businesses, buying homes in their communities, sending their children to college, being able to save, being able to take their children on vacation, spending money, and creating more revenue for our government to help to solve more problems for more people, getting people out of poverty. That's what we're supposed to be doing, solving problems for people. That's what our government's responsibility is. That's why it requires to have a big government. Having a big government is a plus. There's no such thing as a small government. We have big problems, and it only takes and will only be able to have resolutions of those problems with a government who can handle. Private industry could never solve the kinds of problems that we endure, the kind of problems that we have. Private industries cannot provide the kinds of support when we have natural disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes. Private industry has never been able to solve those problems. It takes a government to do that. And so what we have to do is just to learn that we have to participate in our government to make sure that our government are doing it right and that it is equitable. Not what we have been going through for these past crazy years. What 45 Trumpism is showing us is just who we are not and who we should not aspire to be. And we should send him back to the private sector and then have him to be held accountable for his misdeeds that he has done. And let's work so that we can have a more perfect union. We don't have to agree on every single solitary thing, but we do have to agree on as a basic set of values. We can be decent, and we ought to be. I wish I could remember that movie, and I mentioned it to you all last week about this demon that came to town, to this wonderful small town where everybody took care of each other. They never had any issues. It was just this wonderful town. And this demon came to town and had everybody in the town killing each other. I forget the name of the movie. Now, I know that I think it's important that we become, and we do not allow for ourselves to be demonized by Donald Trump. And I really just firmly believe and fundamentally believe that that cycle is turning, that it is turning, that he's not going to win, and they are not going to win, because we don't want to go back there. The vast majority of us do not and will not go back there. I understand people being frustrated. I understand people being upset. I understand people being upset with people in the Democratic Party. But you know what? You don't blow up the system. What you do is you organize so that you can sit down, and which is why we have a democracy. That's what a democracy is. If you don't like something that somebody is doing, you get a clipboard, as Barack Obama said to us, get a clipboard and a pen, and you go door to door, or you organize people together to go and to have a meeting with your representatives. And if your representatives don't want to have a meeting, then sometimes you have to demonstrate outside your representative's office in order to make them respond to the will of the people. That is called the democracy that we have. What they're asking for and what they're suggesting is not a democracy. It's not a democracy. Now, What I do want to play, I want to play a clip, and I'm probably going to go back to Project 2025, but what I do want to play is there have been these accusations about Vice President Kamala Harris, and it is clear to me that the people who make these accusations have not read, have not researched. There are people who are on radio, there are people who have platforms. Shame on them. And it's very disappointing that because of their lack or unwillingness to do the hard work of researching, and it's really not that hard, it's really not that difficult, to get the information, to read the information, to analyze what the truth is from the fiction, so that you're on the right side of history and you're on the right side of issues. Because whatever we're doing is not just about us. It is really about outside of ourselves. When you think outside of yourself and how we can do things to make life better for others, when you are reaching out to help somebody else, you cannot help but to be helped yourself. I was raised on that principle. When you are reaching to help others, you cannot help but to be helped yourself. This ideology of, I got mine, you get yours, that's an unsuccessful ideology. And the idea of suggesting that people should not invest in their children, future, and their education. I saw something on Facebook where a certain, radio host was trying to suggest that one, making home ownership accessible to parents to be able to provide a home for their children, and then later on in life being able to use the equity in those homes to educate their children, to start a business. That is what real estate investment is all about. I am a real estate investor. I am a real estate expert. That's what I do for a living, 42 years. And for them to suggest that that was wrong tells me that this is a person who is not necessarily giving financial advice, but they couch themselves as having people in place to help people to reach financial goals. Tells me about their own ignorance about what the investment of real estate is. There was a story that was done by a very popular news journalist on CBS This Morning, same as Tony DeCopo. He did a story about how his parents bought a home in a community and how a black family was discriminated against in that same community to buy a home that they could afford to buy. That his parents bought that home, and that home later became worth a lot of money, that his parents were able to send him and his siblings to school, to college, to provide for them to go on and to provide some wealth for the family that this black family was not afforded, who could afford it at the time. My point is, if you don't know what it is that you are really talking about, especially when you're on these public airways and you're providing what some people call information, others call misinformation and disinformation. You should be very careful of what you are putting out. Just because you're trying to prove a political point, and all you're really proving politically is that you're uninformed or you're misinformed. That's what you're really proving. So, as I said in the promo, is that we have to deal with misinformation. So let me deal with one of the things that I've heard this week on one of the previous shows of the people who so-called themselves supporting Donald Trump. And, they're railing against the Democrats because the Democrats have been in power, blah, 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 and all this sort of thing. Yet, everything that I see them show up to, Democrats are the ones that are responsible for. Every grant that they have, Democrats are the ones who are responsible for them getting the grants. Now, that I am not here as a holy alliance to Democrats. I am a Democrat, and I'm going to be a Democrat. There was a time that I was so frustrated with the Democratic Party that I said, I think I'm going to register as an independent. But then I had to really think about it. No, I'm not going to deregister as a Democrat. I'm a Democrat because I believe in the democratic values. I am going to work to make sure that the democratic values work better for our people. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to stay in my family, and I am going to challenge my family and the members of my family to do better by our people. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm a proud Democrat. I'm going to be a Democrat. I'm going to die one. So last week, I heard them talking about the First Step Act. And in the First Step Act, which was a bipartisan policy that was put into place, that was passed by Congress, overwhelmingly passed by Congress, and signed into law by Donald Trump in 2018. Now, of course, you have some people who call themselves supporters of Donald Trump because of the First Step Act. Now, in December of 2018, former President Donald Trump signed into law the First Step Act. The act was the culmination of a bipartisan effort to improve criminal justice outcomes as well as to reduce the size of the federal prison population, while also creating mechanisms to maintain public safety. So the First Step Act requires the Attorney General to develop a risk and needs assessment system used to assess recidivism, risk, and criminal genetics needs of all federal prisoners, and to place prisoners in recidivism reducing programs and productive activities to address their needs and to reduce the risk. Under the Act, the system provides guidance on the type, the amount, and the intensity of recidivism reduction programming, and productive activities to which each prisoner is assigned, including information on which programs prisoners should participate in based on the criminogenic needs. The system also provides guidance on how to group, to the extent predictable, prisoners with similar risk levels together in recidivism reduction programming and housing the assignment. The act also amends the 18 USC 4042 to require to assist inmates in applying for federal and state benefits to obtain identification, including a social security card, driver's license, and other official photo identifications and birth certificates. Now, so the First Step Act was to make sure, put into place to help those people who are incarcerated under what they consider to be low-level risk convictions, and to assist them from recidivating, right? The First Step Act was signed into law in 2019 by Donald Trump. Also, as a part of the First Step Act, there was supposed to be $75 million a year put into this program to help to develop these recidivism reduction program. Guess what happened in 2019? The Trump economic budget reduced the 75 million to 14 million. They basically starved the program in the next fiscal budget. So the First Step Act was something that he signed into law, which was a good start, but then they started to starve the program because by reducing recidivism, that means that privately held prisons, which the first privately owned prison was built in 1984, just 40 years ago. They wouldn't have enough inmates for the privately held privatization of prisons. So we have prisons for profit. So the idea that someone wants to hold a halo over Donald Trump's head because they just didn't want to read, they didn't want to do the research. And that's the first thing that they'd like to throw out, is the First Step Back. That Donald Trump freed a bunch of people. Donald Trump did not free a bunch of people. He signed the law signed it into law, but then his budget committee starved it in the following year. So that's why it's important to read, research, and get the facts. And then when you're putting out information so that people can go and they can research it, they can read it, and they can verify the information that you're putting out. Or they can refute the information that you're putting out. But I just gave you the information that you can go and you can verify. You can easily find it. All you have to do is do a few Google searches, and you'll find the information that tells you how they starved that program. All right, listen, I want to, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time tonight, but I am going to be doing another program. I want you to join me tomorrow night. It is our legal hour, the People Show's legal hour with Cook County Circuit Court Judge Leonard Murray. We're going to be talking about private contracts, and we're going to be talking about and what your legal rights are in terms of having private contracts and EIN number and all that sort of stuff, and how that works. We're going to continue to talk about the process in the courts. If you have any legal questions about any issues, you can tune into the program. I'm sorry I forgot tonight. Certainly should have taken some calls. We do have our new call-in number, and I didn't take calls tonight, but going forward, we will take calls. I do want you to participate in the program, and but I actually forgot about that. We actually have a call-in number, 951-221-8221. We won't be taking any calls now because we're really towards the end of the program. But tomorrow night, I'll be on with Judge Leonard Murray, and then I'm going to be doing another program throughout the week. But there is a video, because I really just want to show you how awful these two people are, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. So now he's probably never going to be held accountable for, there was a story that was done and about a trip to Egypt that Donald Trump took. He's probably never going to be held accountable for it because the statute of limitation has passed. But I am going to play that story. And I think that it is important that we know just who it is that we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who don't want everybody to be in the democratic process. You know, you even got people like Paul Wayward who said they don't want everybody to vote. He's from the so-called conservative, and he's one of the engineers of the conservative movement. I'll play that clip for you. You all remember this?
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
That's the conservative movement. That's the founder of the conservative movement, Paul Wayward. All right. So look, but again, I'm going to be doing some other programs, providing you with more information. And I want to thank intellectualradio.com and Earl Winfrey for giving us this platform to be able to share with you information. I wanted to close this out. I want to close out tonight. But I am going to close out tonight something that people have been trying to say about Kamala Harris. But I'm going to close this out about her views about law enforcement. This is back from 2009 with the then district attorney.
Nobody cares about the fact that we've got a bunch of young black and brown men in prison. That argument is not working. What I suggest we do as African Americans is own this issue in law enforcement and then define it in the way that works for us. Because it is a myth to say that African Americans don't want law enforcement. We do. We want our grandmothers to be able to walk to church and be safe. We want our babies to be able to walk to the park and be safe. What we don't want is racial profiling. What we don't want is excessive force. That's right. What we don't want is to have our civil liberties and civil rights be stripped. But we do want law enforcement. So let's define it in the way that works for us by saying, I want community policing. I want a police department that works in my neighborhood and in my community that reflects the mores and the culture and respects my grandmother, again, when they walk in to talk to her. I want a system of accountability in the criminal justice system that says law enforcement needs to own crime prevention as much as it talks about long sentences.
There you go. Kamala Harris in 2009 at the State of the Black Union with Tavis Smiley. and I believe this was in California. All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the People Show on intellectualradio.com. I'll see you guys the same place, same time next week. Have a good night.